Welcome to the Ian Bousfield Experience. I'm glad you're here. This series of podcasts are just things that come up in my mind when I'm thinking about playing, when I'm thinking about teaching, and general thoughts about music. There are some things here that I hope you'll find really useful. And don't forget, if you've got any comments or if there's anything you want to discuss further, go to ianbousfield.com. Hello and good morning from Bern as I look out on this misty, overcast, autumnal morning. One feels a desire for lots of pumpkin, open fires and very warming red wines. However, down to business, I guess we could call this COVID-4. But a lot of this is my own thoughts, not just questions. So if any of you have any more questions, get them to me really quickly, because I think I'm going to close this passage of play up pretty quickly. It would appear I am becoming an influencer. Whatever that means, that's what people call. Everyone wants to be an influencer these days, don't they? They want to disrupt industries. Wow, cool. Because Norman Lebrecht has been the author and critic, music critic. Norman Lebrecht has been running this thing. Where are the music directors? I would say echoing what I said in a podcast, but not quite echoing, so amplifying massively, because his readership is much bigger than mine, and his sphere of influence is much greater. So I am really delighted to see that this has been picked up by so many musicians now. I still am seeing a void when it comes to music directors standing up for their musical communities. I don't understand. Why are they not going toe-to-toe with the local politicians? Why are they not fighting for this thing? They just do seem to have headed for the hills and waited until the problem's gone. They're going to come back down again. And I am astonished, and I hope that this is remembered. As I hinted at earlier, I can't imagine people like George Solti, Claudio Abbado, George Zell, etc., disappearing to their holiday cottages and waiting until the coast is cleared. I think they would be there doing what they could for the community which they represent, not only the musical community. Music is a benefit to the entire community. This we know, and they are the mouthpiece. We do our best, but they have the influence. So Norman Lebrecht has run this series of articles, where have the music directors gone, kind of thing. For those of you who don't know Norman Lebrecht has written two seminal books, The Maestro Myth and I think Slipped Disc, which should be essential reading for anybody interested in music. Wonderful books. He also runs a website called Slipped Disc, which is kind of like a musical notice board: births, deaths, marriages, music directors moving, people changing, artist agents, whatever. The only thing I find quite regrettable about it is that it's open to comments to people who seem to need something better to do in their life, because all they do is spew their bile out onto the comments. So for that reason, I stopped looking at that site a long time ago. So I doubt Norman Lebrecht listens to this, but that would be my feeling. I think in general it's a good thing, and he is a brilliant commentator, but and seems to have his finger on the pulse of everything, which is remarkable. But I wish he'd do something about that comment section. I really do. So anyway, that's starting to happen. I love the protest that we individually are making. Reinhold Friedrich, the great Reinhold Friedrich trumpet, a virtuoso and professor in Karlsruhe, where he did his class concert and everyone sat there with masks on and but held their instruments up and didn't play. Helmut Fuchs, Jonathan Nuss in the Staatskapelle Dresden made beautiful presentations as well to show the situation that we're in. So yeah, great. We need to urge people to represent us a little more, I think. Without wishing to get myself into too much hot water, I'd like to discuss discuss something that I've been thinking about quite a lot recently, and I'm calling it parameters. Parameters of excellence. How we listen, what we listen to. Um, you know, I often say this to my students is, when I was a kid, we used to watch the news on the television, one of the two channels that we had back then. And behind the newsreader was a map of the world. And there, right in the center, it was England. And then there were these tiny little specks. One was Russia, the other was America, and then right down a dot at the bottom was Australia. And nothing much in between. And I'm sure you'll know what I'm talking about wherever you are in the world. If you're watching the news in Montreal, there's Montreal, there's Canada, enormous, and then there's this tiny little blob underneath, that's the rest of America. And I think we all get these perceived parameters. There's this wonderful saying that I learned in Austria, which is somebody who was world famous in Vienna. They're mean. The Viennese are so mean. Or it's like some people here. I mean, Switzerland is really the famous case of world famous in Switzerland. People who are probably not known outside of Switzerland, but in Switzerland they're world famous. A bit like the American World Series in baseball, which is contested between American teams. By the way, I do like baseball, but it's a time you guys gave that up and learned the proper game. The most popular ball sport in the world, cricket. It is because there are 1 billion Indians and there is only one sport in India. They've won, that's it, and it is a great game. I digress. And in the same way as people listening to the news or looking at the news will see that the center point of the whole universe is their country, it's not personally directed at anyone, it's perfectly natural. We see that with playing, which is where we get the feeling that people from certain countries in the world really think that they have the greatest trombone, oboe, violin, piano school in the world. Now, if we look at the trombone, you can see, come on guys, English trombone players really think they've got something over the rest of Europe. They really do. They really think that we are kind of like, in many ways, superior. And France, planet France, they feel the same. And so with this, recently in years in the Netherlands, there's this feeling, we're the best kind of thing, And I'm not even going to start with the USA, because you're probably scratching your heads and thinking, yeah, but we are the world's greatest brass playing nation. What's he talking about? And as a bit of a nomad, having spent the last 20 years of my life traveling and trying to assimilate myself into certain cultures and styles and learn to be a little bit more fluid, I think it's a little easier for me to see this, because I've wondered this. It's like, why do those people think they're the best? It's like, if we look at, let's start with my own people. Let's start with the British. Beautiful sounds, beautiful certain type of sound, wonderful basic articulation, certain type of articulation, personified by John Iveson. He's incredibly English, beautiful, wonderful slide technique, great legato. Real sense of melody. That's their parameters. And when they play loud, they bite a bit, Don't think they do, because they're standing behind the trombone, but on the other side, he bites quite a bit. And that's the parameter that we as English people set up. Anybody outside that parameter, that's not what we do. That's not as good. Is the immediate assumption, which goes back to my long-held belief, music, the universal language, so and if you look at the US, if you look at trombone playing in the US, I'm not going to talk about other instruments. It may be the same on other instruments, I don't know. You know, if you want to sit people, also with English people, if you want to sit them in a section, bloody marvellous. I mean, lined up, in tune, together, subdivided, great. You know, the American parameters of, again, a different type of sound, but a certain type of sound. And this perception of darkness and and broad, big, so big, dark, even though it doesn't actually necessarily always sound like that. This perception of dark and not bright and big and heavy and long and sustained. And I mean, these are the parameters that you people draw for yourself there without realizing it from childhood. And I'm not criticizing it. I like it. You know, listen, I just did a CD with a trombone quartet. They're bloody amazing. He's wonderful. What an honor it was to sit in a section with them. And it was just so easy. You know, I mean, yeah, we did rehearse a bit, but it just lined up. It just worked. It was incredible. So please realize that I'm not shooting at anybody or attacking anyone. It's a comment on parameters. Because I recently had a conversation with someone, and we were talking about, guess what? He was an American, and we were talking about the political situation at the time, which is sort of compulsory when you talk to any American these days. And he said, "Yeah, we got problems, but we do make the best trombone players in the world." And I said, "You what?" And he looked like he sounded like someone had hit him on the head with a hammer. He's like confused, but we do, don't we? And that sort of led me to thinking, as much as I'm an admirer of many American trombone players, friends with many American trombone players, and an admirer of the school, there are a lot of things about it that I really appreciate. It set me off thinking, why was this person so confused when I challenged that assertion? And it's because, according to their set of parameters, what many people, let's say in Europe, do, you know, it's like, well, the intonation is not perfect. The subdivision is, by the way, not all Americans play the right rhythm. You know, the subdivision is not perfect. You know, the sections, you know, perhaps are not as matched as ours are, kind of thing. Therefore, they're not as good. What you don't realize is that European players are like, well, where's the musical line? Where's the expression? Where's the fantasy? Where's your idea? You're just playing blocks. What are you doing? Because the Europeans are listening with their parameters. So where am I going with this? Why am I talking about this? Well, apart from anything else, it saves my wife from having to listen to it. Thank you for being my therapist. It's like, as many of you will know, I have a very large wine cellar, and many of us appreciate, you know, the wines of Burgundy, Bordeaux, Italy. I've had some Spanish wines I like, the odd American, they seem to, the stylistic difference there. Interestingly, the stylistic difference between American wine and European wine seems to parallel the situation with music, but I think that may be another podcast. And so I do appreciate wine from everywhere. I don't, goodness me, I mean, they said they're going to start making wine in Poland. Fascinating, great. If you talk to an Italian and ask them what wine they like, Italian. Okay, so you like Italian wine. Well, French wine? No, I like Italian wine. And what about the food? Italian food. I like Italian food. You know, like. But what about Japanese? No, Italian. I like Italian food. Okay. Music. What music do you like? Like Italian music. Yeah. What about Marlowe? Yeah, with the Italian conductor. Yeah. And so I guess where I'm going with this is, we need to learn to see those parameters to open our mind. French trombone players are judging excellence by their own excellent set of parameters, as are Dutch ones, as are English ones, as are American ones. It is not wise to assume superiority based on your own very narrow based set of parameters. Now, am I talking about life or music here? Maybe it's all the same. We could do with a bit more looking at outside our own parameters. So I think the wonderful thing, the beautiful thing of music is seeing the same beauty that somebody else sees. And then we have a universal language. Then, and I do appreciate all of those schools that I've talked about, absolutely all of them. Equally, perhaps not. But I think learning to see other people's parameters and helping them to see yours whilst appreciating both is really a beautiful way to go. David Rood, my friend David Rood, good guy, has written a question in here where he said, I recall you saying you didn't play an F attachment until quite some years into your orchestral career. Yeah, I was 44, David, yeah. It got me curious, so I took the valve off my horn, and frankly, I love it. I understand that. I was just curious how you develop your slide technique in the lower slide positions enough to do stuff like La Gazzellatra, Forza del Destino, etc. I'm getting better out there, but I'm still struggling a bit, partly on account that I'm not very tall. David, contact Nikki Abisi. She's got something for you. Also, I was wondering, sorry, I'm a cheeky bugger. David, you should have known that. You should have known that was coming. Also, I was wondering how you did stuff that clearly went into the valve register, like the Festa Roman or the Last Movement in Berg Three Pieces. Okay, I'm looking forward to this one. Right, let's go through this one, David. Yeah, just to be clear, when I was a kid, back in the old days, back in 1843, when I first started as a professional trombone player, first trombone players played on a trombone by and large without a valve. In Germany, they were playing on like King 3Bs on first trombone, doing the ring cycle on King 3Bs. I did that in Vienna once. The trumpets loved it. So did I. It was great. No one said anything. The trombones said, hey, sounds good, do it. And in the end, peer pressure is like, I can't just play on a pea shooter. This is embarrassing, So in the end, I gave in. I don't know whether I regret that or not. That was like 18 years ago. How did I develop my slide? How did I develop my slide technique down there? David, I didn't know what playing with a valve was. I had no choice. If you start age 7 without a valve, I thought valves were what bass trombone players used because they couldn't play high. And honestly, that's how it was. He's like, well, I can't play. Put them on third trombone, Well, I just got to put the valve on, makes them feel better, kind of thing, It was kind of a bit like that then. And I am being naughty, as you know. But there was a little bit of that aspect to it. In the same way as, those who played alto trombones were the weaklings with no high registers, It was ridiculous, but that was kind of the attitude. So how did I didn't have any other choice. There was like, how did I learn to play? There was no option. So the earlier you start, the better it is, I think. I'm starting my boy on a trombone without a valve, and I don't know, I guess at some point, it's all Christian Lindberg's fault. It's all Christian Lindberg's fault. Play this to Christian Lindberg, somebody. Christian, I love you, but it's your fault. All of a sudden, it was okay for first trombone players not to be able to play low. It really was. Because what do you got a second and a bass trombone player for? You don't have to play low. So first trombones had these amazing whistling high registers where they didn't even need an alto trombone. It's like, I just played high, no problem. That's what we did. Second trombone, big sound, middle register. Third trombone played low. And then Christian Lindberg came along and made everything from the bottom of the contrabass trombone register up to the top of the alto trombone compulsory on the tenor trombone. Christian, it's your fault, and I haven't forgiven you. I like trombones without valves on. I do. I just like the feel of it. So what's demanded of us now is so massive. It's so enormous. It's considered normal. It's like, again, devil's advocate. Students say, I need to work on my valve register. Why? Why? Doesn't matter, does it? Oh, it's important. It's not that important. Because, like you say, David, you're scratching around to find orchestral repertoire where we need it. I used to fake it. I just used to play down there without a valve. I'm pretty good. In fact, for a long time, I was better in that register without the valve than I was with it. Big deal. Do you know what, guys? Hate to break it to you, but not one single conductor ever noticed. Not even, no. The only one, and I arrogantly, I played Gunther Schuller, Eine kleine Posaunenmusik with Gunther Schuller 2 or 3 times. And I just put it up the octave. He got very grumpy. But he, in the end, he wrote me a version to be played without the valve. He just changed the notes. Okay, we'll play this one and this one and this one. He was like, where's your trombone? No, I don't play a trombone with a valve. And it was acceptable back then. So to answer your question seriously, David, you know, if there's no thought of it, it's like, well, I have to do that. That's where the note is. The B natural's in 7th, the C's in 6th. That's the end of it. So yeah, I'm playing this repertoire. We did a piece with Pierre Boulez called Memorial, Elliott Carter, with Pierre Boulez London Symphony, and it was for trombone and orchestra, and it really did go into the low register. It really was nasty, and well, not nasty, but you couldn't play it without a valve. And in the middle of the concert, I switched with the second trombone player and borrowed the bell and then gave it back. You know, so I just didn't like the feel of playing without a valve. And yeah, that's kind of how it was. I actually like it now, and I love playing in the low register, and I really enjoy. It's taken me years to learn how to do it, because in the same way, David, as it would take you years to learn to play in 6th and 7th, it took me probably a decade to be comfortable in the valve register. I'm serious. You know, it was not easy, and I've enjoyed that aspect of it. But to answer your question, yeah, nobody noticed. The conductor never noticed. The only time you can't really get away with it is now on solo repertoire, which, because that's considered a normal part of the tenor trombone playing register. If you go back 40 years, a trombone soloist was not expected to be able to hammer out a top F and a low C. It'd be one or the other. And so things have changed, and the challenges facing us are greater than they have been before, which is why we needed a sort of basic redesign of the instrument. But yeah, I love playing on trombones without valves, and I keep sort of like mentioning it to Brett Getson every now and then. But I guess that all stopped when this bloody virus struck. Noel Freeman has written in saying, sorry for being late to the party, but I have a question. No problem, Noel. It's a good question. I've been told to stay away from red brass bells for section work and reserve them only for solo, small ensemble work, not including trombone choirs, with the explanation being they won't blend with the others using yellow brass bells. Your collaboration with Getson is a truly magnificent horn. Yes, it is, Noel. But the specs are for red brass bell, which I happen to like. What are your thoughts on how to choose between yellow or red brass bells, and where do you think each is better suited than the other? Wow, that's a bit above my pay grade, that, Noel. I'm not sure I can explain this for you. There are a lot of other people out there who'll give you the answer. But the more I'm involved directly in trombone design, which I have been since 1990, 30 years anniversary now, starting with Yamaha. You start off thinking you know what you like, or you know what creates what effect. And after 30 years, I realize, as where I come from, I know bugger all. I don't know anything. I had a. You got to realize that Christian Griego, poor guy, he's faced with people like me, and previously for many, many years, Joe, demanding that he put something on a production line model that probably 3 people, 5 people in the world would notice. Extremes in the high register in quiet, and we torment the guy. And the end result is that you guys get better instruments. It's like Formula One being used as the research for what we're ultimately going to drive on the road. But there was one issue where I really thumped the table after 27 years of design and said, it's this, this is what I need this doing, this needs to be changed. And Kristen said, no, it's not, it's this. And it's like, you know, sure enough, he was right. A couple of years later, he said, I managed to do a bit more work on this, you know, and that is what you want, isn't it? It was like, yeah, that is what I wanted, yeah, oops. And the more you realise, I've had it, it's fantastic. You're going to love this one, Noel. I'm going to answer your question directly, but it needs some background. Kristen came and did a class for my students here in Bern because she was over visiting, and someone was saying, my trombone's a bit tight, you know, can you, because they're asking all the trombone nerdy equipment questions. Fair enough, he's the man. And he said, okay, just look away. And he got a screwdriver out and just moved the screw on the water key at the end of the slide, half a turn, gave it back. And he said, is that better? And he go, oh, yeah, that's better. What did you do? Now, this guy had been talking, yellow bell, red bell, you know, dual radius slide, you know, and the guy moved the screw on the water key half a turn. And these poor people like Kristen, they have to listen to idiots like us. They have to listen to someone like me telling him his job. And they have to be polite back. Now, bear in mind, I know rather more about that than your average, what do you say in America, your average Joe. No pun intended. I do know more about trombone design. I've been involved in it for 30 years, but I still don't really know. And so I have to take a sharp intake of breath and count out very slowly. When I read questions like yours, no, not that your question's a bad one, it's a great one, but it's indicative of these people that think they know that this does this does that. I would take you back to wine, of course. The big wine critics. These are the priorities. 1, the year. 2, the vineyard. 3, the wine grower. So it's the quality provided in that case by, if you want to say God, the weather, that makes the biggest difference to the wine. And so the quality of the material and the quality of the basic design of the instrument is far more important than the materials themselves. I've said this many times before on podcasts, and it bears repeating. One of the most successful trombone sections I ever played in, there were 4 people in it. One was on a Yamaha, one was on a Conn, one was on a Bach, and one was on a Halton. Let that sink in. And then go back to the parameters thing. Americans, you can't fall back on, but by our parameters, it wouldn't have been very good. No, it was excellent. It was in the London Symphony, and it was a great section. End of. And the chords were balanced, in tune, the articulations were the same. Because those instruments were what were required by those individuals at that time to create the sound and the articulation that we all wanted. We all got the same effect by using different equipment. We weren't all there making different sounds. We all wanted the same thing. We all got the same thing. We all did the same things on different equipment. I'm trying to think what the mouthpieces were. I think it was Dennis with 4AL, 5ABL or something like that. Bach. Back in the days, this was like Stone Age. You didn't have a choice. It was either Bach, Schilke or Wick. That was back before mouthpiece design had its revolution. And bass trombone was on a Marcinkiewicz or something like that. I think it was a weird, at that time, like garage mouthpiece maker in Los Angeles, was it, I think? All completely different. And it worked really well. And I get very grumpy when I hear people saying we have to play on the same equipment so we sound the same. Why don't you get your brains lined up first? It's much more important. Because it's like me saying, you know these shoes I'm wearing? If we're gonna, you should all wear my shoes. Same size, then it'll all be great. It's nonsense. And of course I'm playing devil's advocate. Of course I am. It does help. Yes, it does help, but it doesn't make the difference that a lot of people say it does. There is a now legendary retired trombone maker who you in America, in fact all around the world, we looked up to. And I had a conversation with him. He got very grumpy. He said the material's bullshit. In other words, it doesn't matter what the material is, it's how you treat it. And also, you bear in mind, there are some people who make sounds that are so dark, they need brightening up. So maybe they do need an instrument that's going to, pepper them up a little bit. And then there are people that sound like laser beams and they just need the edge taking off a touch, and it changes the different times of your life. When I was in my early 20s, they used to call me King Edge. I used to tear everything in half. Still can now if I want to. But as I went through my 20s, I kind of in every regards, got fatter. And so, your mouthpiece needs are different. My mouth's different to yours. My concept of sound would be different to yours. So I would say to stay away from red brass bells. Do you know what? When I read your question, I thought, is my bell red? Do I have a red bell on my trombone? Is that it? Do I? I don't know. Because there's red and red. It depends on the amount of copper you've got in there. I mean, copper bells are red. And they are crude, rude, and socially unacceptable. So there are degrees of red. There are degrees of yellow. There are, and for me, I guess a balance. If you go too hardcore yellow, if you go too hardcore, copper, you're going to get extremes. And so I like the color of that Getzen, actually. And if you look back over the years, if you look back over, let's say, historical instruments like a Con 88H and look at their standard bell, red is not red. If you look at a 1952 or 68 or whatever to a 1988, the color's going to be different. Okay, they're going to be aging slightly differently, but the actual compounds in the metal structure, metal makeup has changed over the years. I've also, there's some sections in the world, there's one here in Switzerland where I think the first trombone player has the right to decide what equipment someone plays on. Now, you can hear from these podcasts, I'm not exactly a weak character. I have an opinion and I'm not trying to give it, but I have never told anyone what instrument they should bloody play on. Never. I find that's one of the most disrespectful things you can ever do. People need to play on whatever they are comfortable. If they, on the other hand, reach out for my advice, boy, they'll get it. But if someone is comfortable on something, hey, stick with it. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Out there on the battlefield, we all need all the help we can get. And, if I have a student who's an excellent student, who's one of the best students I've ever had, I have to say, and already in an excellent job. And I didn't feel his instrument was right for him. And I kind of hinted in that direction. And it took me 14 months to say, damn it, I don't think that's working for you. But I still didn't say, you should play on this, this, or this. I just said, I don't think that's going to bring the best out in you. And that's as far as I go. And that's with a student. No, that's with one of my students. And if they then reach out for help and say, well, what would you recommend? Then I can say, well, try this or this or this, So that's red bells in a section work. That's awfully high level. That's awfully big time. No, whoever's saying that, that's like really high level stuff. Yeah. I also think in a section people bring to the party their own independent different qualities. We don't want to wipe them out. We need to meet in the middle. But if someone has independent, listen, I'll be really clear. There are two ways that really work in a section. when I had Jeremy Wilson or Lindsay Schilling on second trombone, or Mark Gall, it was like they pumped the sound out. They had the huge, bloody monstrous, gorgeous sounds, and I put the excitement on top of that, and I loved that. That, I guess, would be my favourite way of working. So it wouldn't work if we made the same sounds. And it was bloody wonderful. This sort of like bright, crystalline, exciting sound on top of this wonderful, broad sound, underneath. And of course, making the bridge between me and the bass trombone player. The other model that worked really well was with Eric Kries on second trombone, because we were both effectively first trombone players and we were both doing the same thing. And I think when I listened back to the recordings that we did in that constellation, it was a bit perhaps crude, rude and socially unacceptable would be the way of describing it. But I loved it. I had a lot of fun doing that. So they're the two things, it's... the first trombone player needs to be the bridge between the trombone section and the trumpets and the horns and the rest of the orchestra. If you're making the same sound, how are you going to do that? And the last one in this podcast comes from my friend Nec Kurbos from Slovenia. He was a student of Thomas Eibinger in Graz, very fine teacher, very fine man, and is currently studying with another friend, Jamie Williams, in Rostock. Nech, thank you for your question. It's an interesting one. It's a twofold question, and it's about how I felt sitting with the second trombone on my left or second trombone on my right, is the first part. The second part is about working with people playing C trumpets or B flat trumpets. So, Nech, yeah, I liked, in the London Symphony, we used to sit. So I'd have the second trombone on the left and bass trombone beyond there, right down towards the tuba. And I liked that because it was easier to lead, because my bell, being on the left-hand side, was kind of like right next to the ear of the second trombone player, so it wasn't so difficult to lead. If you sit the other way round, as we did in Vienna, so the second trombone player is on the right-hand side, then the second trombone plays, the bell is in my ear and I hear more of that than anything else. That was tough. In the end, I got used to it. And also, I did play that way around when I was a kid in brass bands. They play that way. And I did talk to them in Vienna about maybe changing it round. One of the old guys said, no, we play this way because this is how Mahler set the orchestra up in 1902 or whatever it was. So if it was good enough for Mahler, it's good enough for us. Well, okay. And that was that. So you get used to having it on that side, but of course it is much easier with the rest of the section on your left-hand side. What a bigger issue is, though, next is I like sitting next to the first trumpet because I want to follow them. I want to hear what they're doing. I want to fit in with what they're doing. And in the London Symphony, in the Barbican Centre, I used to sit behind the first trumpet. And when I was sitting behind Rod Franks, it was quite easy because he would always move a little bit. He would always lean. So even in quiet entries, I knew exactly when he was going to come in. Maurice Murphy used to pick his trumpet up and stay absolutely still. And because his breathing wasn't great, you never knew when it was going to happen, really. So it was a bit of a mystery. And that's how it was in the opera as well in Vienna, sitting behind the first trumpet. And the stands in Vienna are huge, the huge wooden things. So you can't see the first trumpet. And in many cases, you can't hear them either. So that got quite tough. And because the Vienna Philharmonic or the Vienna State Opera is still one of the last places in the world where absolute pianissimo is played, it's very difficult to hear what's going on sometimes. But in concerts with the Vienna Philharmonic, I was sat next to the first trumpet, and I didn't mind. Whether it was on the left or on the right. Sometimes, actually, it's really interesting. There were two conductors who switched it around in Vienna, Bernhard Haitink and, if I remember rightly, Niklaus Harnoncourt, Just sort of went, no, 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 no. Horns, you're on the wrong side. Switch to that side. Trumpets, trombones, switch round. And there was people grumping about tradition, this, and he didn't, no, 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 it has to be the other way around. And I never talked to them about it. I was very happy that they'd done it, but I never asked them why they'd done it. More peculiar to me is the horn situation, because in the London Symphony, you know, you've got horn one, and then on the first horn's right is the second horn. And that means the same thing. The second horn player has got the first horn player's bell kind of in their face, and that's easier to lead. In Vienna, it's the other way around. And the first horn player said they liked the security of the note underneath them being really full and loud. I guess I can see that. But one thing, Netch, the worst place to sit is behind the horns. I didn't really care where I sat, but the biggest argument I ever had was when it was a small stage and I finished up with the horns right in front of me in Vienna. Oh, goodness me. And once in Vienna, in London as well, I sat behind the London Symphony horns in Brahms 1. And for the first three movements, I felt like I was having sandwiches spat into my face or whatever it was they'd had for their meal before the concert. You know, it was, and it's amazing. Those instruments, they sound, sometimes it's an absolutely horrible from behind. And you go and stand out the front, there's this noble, sort of really magnificent sound, but behind it's not always the most beautiful thing. That said, I will make an exception. I would sit behind Wolfgang Tombuck any day, the former first horn in the London Symphony, in the Vienna Philharmonic, who always sounded magnificent, no matter where you were around him. It was fantastic. I also once sat directly behind, when I was 16, I sat directly behind Dale Clevenger. I was playing first trombone in 1980, and sitting behind him, that was one of the best lessons I ever got in my life. That was incredible. Netch, leading on to your next issue, which is a bit of a more thorny issue of how did I find the intonation between playing with people on B-flat trumpets and C trumpets, because in London there were B-flats, in Vienna there were Cs. I actually have to say, in an orchestra, I prefer the sound of a C trumpet. I really do. Playing with, I don't know, it's difficult for me to say, Netch, because in England there is this huge philosophy of intonation and togetherness anyway. So yes, I did find it easier playing in England, but British brass sections just tend to play in tune, in Vienna it was more of a problem, and that's a big subject. Don't know how long this podcast is going to finish up, but when you're doing goodness knows how many 100 performances a year, and sometimes 2 or 3 performances a day of stuff you're not rehearsing, you've got to somehow get the ship together and get it out on the ocean and sail it, and you don't have time to work so much on intonation. Their priorities are performance, musicality, and then intonation has to come a little bit further down the list. And I understand that. I've been there. It's like, it's best, that you haven't rehearsed it and you don't want to mess up, so you're just trying to make sure you get everything right, kind of thing. You play the notes right. So that caused some intonation issues in Vienna. Whether that was to do with the pitch of the instrument, I'm not sure. So I'm not really answering your question, am I? I guess yes, Netch, yes. C trumpets, they're in different parts of the partials to a B flat. They're going to be, but you do get used to it. I don't think it needs to be a problem for too long. No, it shouldn't be a problem. Basically in tune is in tune, whatever pitch of instrument you play on. It will be easier to naturally get the intonation right if you're playing in the same pitch instrument, but that shouldn't prohibit you from playing in tune. I mean, if you listen to the old Chicago Symphony recordings. The trumpets are playing on C trumpets, and the intonation's perfect. So no, it should be quite possible to play perfectly in tune. It might need a bit more accommodation on a C trumpet, but it should. And here's the interesting tidbit for you historically, is I was obsessed with the history when I was in Vienna, and I went into the percussion storeroom in the Musikverein, and I found a bloody trombone in there. Now, if we go back to the 1890s, when Mahler took over at the Vienna State Opera, one of his stipulations was that he brought the great Franz Dreyer, who had been his first trombone in the Staatskapelle Dresden, and the guy who played the first performance of Mahler 3. He brought him with him, German guy. As when I went to Vienna, they pointed out, don't worry, you're not the first non-Austrian first trombone player we had. We had a German 80 years ago. Beautiful. And now, Franz Dreyer played on a slide trombone, and the Vienna trombone section at the time were playing on valve trombones. So they were doing your Bruckner symphonies and the first performances of Brahms symphonies on E-flat, so alto, tenor and bass valve trombones. Must have sounded horrible. And indeed, when Mahler came to Vienna, I think a couple of the section had to retire because they just didn't know how to play a slide. One of them went back to study, and they had to have new instruments made for them. And I found this trombone that looked extremely old. It may still be there, I don't know. And it was without question in C. It was not a B-flat tenor trombone, it was in C. It was almost unplayable because the slide barely moved. And looking at the age of it, I would have aged it around that 1900 to 1920, sort of, maybe even earlier, who knows. But it was quite definitely in C. So I think it's possible that there was a time in Vienna where they all played on C trombones. I don't know how long it was, how long that time lasted, but maybe that was how it started. And for any of you who are interested in research, no, I don't think it was a big tradition. I think that was probably a one-off. If you go back to the classical trombones, I actually played on the trombone that it's thought that was the inspiration for Mozart writing the Tuba Mirum, because he took mass at the Peterskirche in the first district in Vienna every Sunday, and we know which trombones were played in the orchestra every Sunday at the time that Mozart was going there. And I've played the Mozart Requiem on that instrument. Again, the slide was structurally unsound, I would put it to put it politely, and that was definitely in B flat. So I think it was just this one anomaly, but the trombone was without question in C. There's a good one for trombone nerds. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Take it easy, more coming soon. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that. If there are any issues that you found particularly interesting, don't forget to contact me, and always go to ianbousfield.com for lots more interesting stuff.